Hello, everybody, and welcome back to day 29 of the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge. So, today I wanted to talk about something that just came up in my comic process, which is the action scene. So, I just finished writing the first bit of punch, 1, 2 kind of action scene in my comic. And I wanted to talk about something that is probably not very intuitive in when writing those kinds of scenes, which is that when doing it for a visual medium, clarity and tension in the scene kind of work as opposites. So, there's when reading about when reading a comic and there's an action scene, or there's something where the tension is rising, emotions are high, people are screaming or yelling because they're fighting, physically or verbal, the way that the panels and the characters are drawn allow the author to convey that kind of intensity. The lines get rougher and sketchier, the characters start breaking out of the panels and start going on to the white space around the panels and everything. And so when you start implementing those kinds of drawing techniques in order to ramp up the tension and the stress and the intensity of the action scene, it's very easy to lose clarity when doing that, because they're opposites of each other. Rough, sketchy lines and motion and movement and the kinds of compositions of panels that go along with those kinds of action scenes, they sacrifice clarity in order to do better on intensity. And so I had to think about, as I was writing, I had to think about how I was going to be able to convey clarity of movement, of action, of intent, while also aiding in the level of intensity. So I found that the best thing for me to do was to do kind of a play-by-play, which is when I'm writing a regular scene, I don't focus on the in-between actions, on any transitional actions. Unless a character is part of the motion of their doing, say walking or turning or looking up and down, unless that motion is important to the flow of the scene or important to the composition of the panel, I don't really draw characters in the middle of actions. I draw them before and after, because when readers are reading, they fill in the blanks. If you draw them a character looking one way and then the next panel they're looking another way, readers assume that in between those panels they just they turn to their head, so there's no doing any kind of transitional motion, making that its like own panel or anything is not necessary and kind of hinders it, slows down the pace of a already slow scene in comparison to like an action scene. But when doing action scenes, I found that it was very integral to do those kinds of transitional motions, or else readers will get confused on how one character went from one thing to another, because they're already distracted by the intensity of the scene. They're distracted by the way you've conveyed intensity through your lines and your colors, and maybe you have more severe angles, and so the motion of the character gets lost in that, and it can be very confusing. I know sometimes when I'm reading comics, I have to stare at a page, and maybe even a specific panel, for a while to try and figure out what's going on in the panel, because it's a panel of like a character in the middle of a motion, but there was no indication in the previous panel on what motion they were about to do. And so I like read one panel and then move on to the next one, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? Like, what are they doing? What am I even looking at? And so if the intensity of the scene was much, much lower, like a regular just discussion scene where people are just talking, then I wouldn't have had such difficulty figuring out what was in the panel, because it wouldn't have been drawn in such a way where the clarity of the figure is already kind of obscured. So basically what I'm saying is, this topic has more to do with the thumbnailing and the sketching phase of like making your comic, but what would help immensely in clarity of action between panels, and the ability for your reader to follow along with that action, is to be thinking about how the character gets from one motion to another while writing. And like a good foolproof way to do that is like a 3-step process of action, which is what is it called? Oh my god. Ramping up. Fuck, what's the word? Preparation, I guess. Preparation of action. Completing the action, like doing it, and then the reaction. So it's preparation for action, action, and then reaction. So preparation for action could be, well, let me set the scene though. 2 people, they're physically fighting, and you want to write about one of the characters, character A, punching character B, and character B breaks their nose. So how you would do the 3 steps of like clear action would be to write character A pulls back their arm, and that would be one panel. And when you're writing, you can add like what is it? It's not, you can add a fourth step, and it's not necessary, but it can add to the scene and add even more clarity, which is that after the preparation for action, which would have been character A pulling back their arm, hand in a fist, about to punch, then the second panel could be character B, a close-up on their face, eyes widened as they realize that they're about to get punched. And that one's that's not like necessary, especially if you have two characters who are really good at fighting, because if they're really good at fighting, then if character B recognizes that they're about to get punched in the face, then they'll have time to block it. So if the end of this like little part of the scene is you want character to B to get punched in the face with their nose broken, then maybe having a react like that second panel wouldn't be like the best choice. But so the first step would be preparation of action. Character A pulls back their arm to punch, and then the second step is action, movement. You would want to convey the character A punching character B. So that would be, you know, your classic like Captain America punching Nazis type panel, where one character is at the end of the motion of punching. So the first panel is their arm is back, ready to punch, and then the second panel, or third, is that their arm is all the way out, and they have maybe already punched the character B, or their fist has connected to their face. And then the third or fourth panel is the reaction, and this one is, you know, can continue on into multiple other panels depending on how slow the action is paced. So if it's like a really quick fight scene where it's just one move after another, then the reaction might just be one panel. But if you want to linger on the consequences of whichever of the punch, then it could be two or more panels, and all of those panels would be the characters reacting to the punch. So the first panel of the reaction might be the character B hitting the ground, and then the next one would be them like lifting their hands up to their face, nose already bleeding, and they've maybe grimace in pain because their nose is broken, and that's when you would indicate to the audience through speech or drawing that their nose is broken. And then the third reaction panel might be character B like looking at character A and being like, you shouldn't have done that, or something like that. And then it would continue on, and you just go back to step one, which is preparation for action, but now your character B is preparing for action against character A. And so it's just a kind of back and forth like that, just step one, step two, step three, step one, step two, step three. And it not only aids in a good rhythm, because Obviously, not every action is going to have the same amount of panels dedicated to it. I think that there can't really be any less than 2 panels dedicated to an action. And I would really recommend a minimum of 3, but if the reaction of a reaction to that action is not important really whatsoever, then you could put the action and reaction steps within the same panel, but I don't know, that's just at your discretion. But I really would recommend a minimum of 3 panels to every action that you want to clearly convey to your audience, because obviously, you can do 1 action per panel, but that would be sacrificing clarity of sequence, basically, significantly. And but that's just like a minimum of 3. You can have way more than 3 panels dedicated to a single action, depending on how slowly you want your action scene to be paced, because pacing is not necessarily linked completely to intensity, because a slow-paced scene could be very intense the whole way through, depending on how well you have paced your scene and how well you have ramped up the intensity from the beginning to the really how much you have ramped up the rising action, because rising action also is a very necessary part of any story, from the very largest generalized chunk of your story, which is just your whole story, to the very smallest, which I would consider to be like a scene, maybe a page. But there's not going to be a lot of rising action from the first panel of a page to a second panel. It's really just scenes that I would consider the smallest unit of story when it comes to a coherent and fully realized Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 resolution type, outline. So that is all that I have for you today. Hopefully, it helps if you're writing a scene, an action scene, or you're trying to figure out what you can do to improve clarity of action within your scenes and all of that. And it's really just like advice that is applicable in any scene, but it's I would say most applicable to action scenes. I'd say it's most useful to action scenes. Regular non-action scenes don't necessarily need a tool in order to clarify action, because the point of the scene isn't about action. If it was, it would be called an action scene. So, yes. What do you find hard about action scenes? I'm gonna start asking y'all questions. I want to hear your process and your thoughts, and how you go about doing the certain aspects of comic making. So my question for you then is, what do you find difficult about action scenes, if you find them difficult? And if you don't, then I want to know what it is about action scenes that you find so easy, because I don't know, I'd have to think a little bit more on the question if I was to say whether action scenes are easy or not, but I don't have enough time. So I'm actually going to do the outro now. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.